Hi guys, welcome to Donnington Park and deep dive time. Did not mute like a minute to. Let's try that again. Okay, so Donnington Park, one of my favorite tracks. It is it's got a great flow to it, uh, and uh, and so that makes it really enjoyable to me. But it does have some tricky parts to it. I don't think there's any question about that. So let's talk about those. I think that the two things that I would say that jump out at me about Donington Park when I think about it are are one that I think throttle management, throttle discipline is really important because you have a whole bunch of corners where power oversteer is a significant issue. So I think you have to be very cautious about your throttle management. And the other thing is that I actually think that this is one of those tracks where setup can make a pretty significant difference. And I'll try to talk about that a bit as we go through the lap. Um, but having said that, let's get going on it and see what we can do. Okay, so turn one, as you're approaching it, I'd like to see your left wheels getting all the way over into the green asphalt over here off to the side. Um, track track width is enormous on this track. I think it's easy because a lot like Brands. In that you don't have any real runoff anywhere. You know that it's easy to let that get to you and have you pinching in on the track to keep yourself out of danger. But the reality is, using all of the track is the only place that good times come from, and so you're going to have to force yourself to get out on all of these corners if you're not doing that already. So one of the things, if this is a track that you're struggling on as far as time goes, what's up, Coped? Hey, I saw your disconnect, by the way, at the Misano race. That absolutely sucked. Um, that was really bad luck because you were in a good race with Ratman there. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to suggest to you, if this is a track that you are still learning or that you're struggling at, is um, take a look at your replays from the helicopter view and see if you are legitimately using the entire track. Because that is going to be absolutely critical on some of these corners for you to maximize the time. If you don't do that and you just proceed under the assumption that you are using all of the track, I can virtually guarantee you that you are not, in fact, using all of the track. And the only way you can find that out for sure is to spend some time looking at your replays to ensure that your wheels are as far out as they should be. So that's my first big thought when it comes to this track. I think that will pay a lot of dividends for those of you who are still learning it and trying to get faster on it. But back to turn one. So get yourself all the way out here so that your left side is all the way out into the green asphalt. My braking marker is just the other side of the green asphalt ending, and that is pretty consistent. It depends a lot on how much fuel you have in the car. Since these laps that I was doing was just in hot lap mode, the my braking points are a little bit later than they will be during the actual race itself. But it's just as I'm passing over the green asphalt, that is when I'm getting onto the brakes. This is a slippery corner for both entry and exit, and it's going to take a little bit of balance on your part. I have seen, I've watched a whole bunch of the pros do laps, the sim racing pros that is, do laps on here, and I've seen a whole bunch of different approaches all over this track. But generally speaking, you can I think classify them in one of two different styles. One, either someone who does a much heavier early brake with a longer coasting phase through the apex versus someone who does a much more gradual trail brake up closer to the apex. I don't think either style is necessarily better or worse. I think whichever one allows you to control the back end of the car is the one that you should go with, because both of them can be very fast. The whole key to this corner, however, is getting the apex correct. Okay, so you see the green asphalt on the right hand side. I think your apex needs to be right near the end of the green asphalt. The amount that you can play with your apex on this will depend to a certain extent on the car that you're driving. The kicker for me is that if I get too far into the corner too early and I catch the grass in the Lamborghini, that's going to upset the car, and it's going to make me wait a long time to get back on the throttle because I have to wait for it to settle. So I make sure that I'm out here on the red and white striping. If you drive like the Bentley or the Merc or something along those lines, that handles that a little bit better, you might be able to be more aggressive with this apex and be further in than I am. But the corner tightens in the second half of it, right? So if you are too far in, then you're going to be catching the grass right around here at this point. That's what I am trying to avoid. So one of the big mistakes that I think that that a lot of people will make right here is they will make their corner entry too early. In other words, their steering input will come too early and too much. That is going to put their front tires onto the red and white striping essentially right around, here somewhere, right? If you're already getting onto the red and white stripe curbing here, then you are almost certainly going to be winding up on the grass by the time you get here. So if you find that that is something that keeps happening to you, that's all about your steering input at corner entry. It could also be a combination of the steering input plus you're just not coming wide enough here at the start, right? Because if you are too far to the inside here, that is going to promote an early turn in and early apex, which is what you don't want at this corner. But if you get out here far enough to the left, then go onto your brakes. Be patient on the steering input, and this is going to take some practice because it's a little bit blind as you come up to it. But if you'll be patient on the steering input so that you can get the car into the apex right as you're coming up to the end of the green asphalt, then that will put you in what I think is about as good of a position as you can get. This is the first time where throttle discipline really comes into play, because the exit here is going to test your ability to keep the back end underneath you. You'll see a lot of people spinning out right here at this point, so that's something you're going to have to be careful about. The other thing too is the other problem with apexing this corner too early is that it's going to force you to turn the wheel even more at the apex and here when you're trying to get back on the throttle. That is going to encourage the power oversteer even more than the corner naturally does. It's also going to put you in a position where your front end is going to be pointed out to the left more than you want it to, which is going to make it easy for you when you get back on the gas to run too wide and into the dirt either right here or just past the end of the green curbing. So watch that apex. That is the key point to this corner, I believe. If you get it right, it makes everything easier. And if you get it wrong, particularly if you're apexing it too early, then it sets you up for 3 or 4 different problems from the center of the corner all the way out through the end of the exit. Let's see. So yeah. So good chance that if you're apexing early and you're able to keep control of the back end, you're going to wind up in the dirt right around here somewhere. Let's see. What do I want to? Show you what that looks like. You can use that dotted line, by the way, as a pretty good indicator when you're learning how to turn in properly at the right time. You can use that dotted line ending there as a bit of a guide to when you should begin your the turning phase of the corner and start bringing it in. But it's not just when you start it, it's how much steering you actually use, because even if you start where I'm starting, if you turn in too much and apply too much steering angle, that's going to put you into the curb right here at the beginning of it, which is what you don't want. But if you can just brush it right there as you're going past the end of the green, then that will let you get back on the throttle without fear of going off into the dirt on your exit. I mean, that's about as close as I'd want to make it, you know? Okay. Okay, coming up to the fast left-hander into the fast right-hander. This is a very, very, very tricky part of the track, and it's difficult to get right. Let me think. Let's go down to the right-hander first, because actually, you know what? Here's what I want to do. There are a couple of places on the track where I think this is helpful. Okay, so for Donnington Park is actually, it has a lot more elevation on it than I think what you think it does. Obviously, there's quite a bit of a hill right here, but I want to show you what that does to the balance of the car and your grip levels as you come through it, right? So, as you know, I'm sure, when you're making the left hand, the shift to the left hand right here, you're going over a little bit of a hump right here, and that so the weight comes off of the car and makes it harder to steer. So the timing of the steering is absolutely critical, and I'll show you something here in a second that I think might be able to help you with that. But the key, obviously, is how you set up for the right-hander, because we're all going to be flat out coming through there through the sweeping left-hander. But setting up for the right-hander is everything. And being able to carry as much speed through the right-hander is really where your money's made. Okay, so you can see that as pretty much right as you're coming into the apex is where is essentially the bottom of the hill. Where you get this transition between going downhill and going uphill. The important the important thing to understand about that is what it does to the car as you're coming into your corner entry phase right here and you're on the brakes. Okay, because since you're coming downhill, like all corners, that are on this scenario, the back end is going to get light and it's going to want to move around on you a bit. So you have to be cautious about that. At the same time, you absolutely must get as far left as possible, right? Before you make your turn in. And as you come up here, essentially as you're getting to the apex right here, you want to be able to go back on the gas at this point. That is your goal, right? Because you have now shifted to going back uphill, which means the weight of the car is now much more on the back tires, and you're going to have more grip as a result. Your biggest issue at this point becomes holding the car on the track on the left side on the exit. Okay, but that's okay. Don't worry about that right now. The key thing to understand is that you want to be able to put yourself in a position where you can start going back heavily on the throttle right here as you're passing through the apex. Okay, and you can do that because you are now going uphill and the weight is shifting back onto the back tires, so you have more grip. So how do you do that? Okay, so we know we need that we want to get as far to the left as possible for the to set up for the right-hander, and that all starts on your transition from here in order to take the sweeping left-hander, because it's blind, so it is very easy to screw it up. Okay, here's the guide that I use. When you get to the end of the red and white stripe curbing, right, you can see that the white line continues to curve just a little bit and then straightens up. Okay, that is my cue to start shifting the steering back over to the left. That gets the steering done before I hit this little rise. Okay, and I lose the weight on the car. I already have the car turning where I want it to turn before the weight comes up off of the car, right? So I don't have to do any steering input again until I'm past it. And that lines me up very well in order to get far to the left on the exit. Okay, so watch that again. Past the red and white striped curbing, line curves, straightens, I straighten and turn, I hold it. As soon as you get up to that rise, that's when you're going to pick up the apex of this left-hander. So you can make your adjustment that you need to at that point, right? But if you, let's go back and watch it at full speed. And what I want you to, what I'm doing when I round this corner is that my eyes go to the end of the red and white striping, then follow the white line, and as soon as it straightens up, that's when my wheel starts to turn over to the left. As soon as my wheel starts to turn over, my eyes go up to the left so that they can pick up the apex as I come over that rise, right? But since I've already got the car in a good position, any adjustment I have to make at that point is very small. Okay, so stick it to the right, stay, curb, line, over. Then the small adjustment. That will take practice to get down. It really does. But with enough repetitions, this will absolutely become habit, and this portion of the corner will not be a problem for you anymore. Maybe once you've done it enough times, maybe one time out of 10 or 15, you'll come through here and just be off a little bit, and have to slow up a little bit or make a bigger adjustment than you'd want to. But this absolutely works if you're looking for visual references so that you know what to do and when to do it. This is it right here. Okay. Okay, now as far as braking, going into this, this very similar to turn one. I think you can either do a hard brake with a longer coasting phase, or you can do a little bit longer of a trail brake phase, whichever one you prefer. What I'm going to recommend is that you ignore the number one board, because the chances are it's going to get taken out. So you don't want to use that as your reference. Instead, use the curbing on the right-hand side as your braking reference, and how far beyond it you brake will depend upon how comfortable you are with this corner and the amount of fuel that you have, because keep in mind that you're going downhill. So when you're early in a race with a full fuel load, you're really going to have to back off on your braking point here. But suffice to say that, let's say, in a race scenario where I've got a lot of fuel on board, I'm going to brake as soon as the curb passes out of my peripheral vision on the right-hand side. In a hot lap situation like this or a qualifying session, I'm going to be able to push it a good 5, maybe 10 meters beyond that, much closer to where the one board is. I'm never going to go as far as the one board, but I know that with a light fuel load, I can wait just a heartbeat after the curb passes out of my peripheral vision on the right-hand side, and I'm still going to be able to brake in enough time. So my recommendation, start using the end of the curb as your braking reference. You can see how far to the left my exit to the sweeping left-hander puts me, which is exactly what I want. Now you are going to have to start turning the wheel just a little bit right here towards the center of the track, because the track itself is going to turn into the right on you. And you obviously don't want to run straight off. This getting over here far enough to the left-hand side takes some practice, because it takes a little bit of courage to get used to it. It's very easy to, when you're really just first learning this track and you're trying to get the car over here to the left, it's very easy to get your steering input a little bit wrong and put yourself straight off the track because you caught too much of the curb. Don't worry about that. It's just something that you have to practice and work through until you get the muscle memory down well enough that you can do it confidently. But you definitely want your left wheels all the way over here, right next to the curb itself. I don't necessarily like to get my tires on the curb, because they're a bit of a sawtooth, so I think they can affect your grip just a little bit. So this is about as far left as I want to get. It's not necessarily the end of the world if I touch the curb, but it's not something that I'm trying to do. Okay, so we're in a good position here, and what I want, as I said earlier, is to get the car into a position at the apex where I can be going heavily back onto the gas at that point, right? That means that your turn-in has to be late enough so that you can be completely off of the brakes, by the time you get to the apex. How much you trail brake will determine exactly how much you come off of the brakes, but you definitely don't want to be still having to decrease speed at this point, okay? So you want to be done braking and done coasting when you get to this point of the apex. You also want your right tires at the very least up onto the red and white striped curbing, and if possible up onto the green asphalt. I don't think you want to go beyond that, however, because you'll feel it when you get too far to the right on this. You'll feel that there's a bump up there to the right that the right tires will ride up on, that's going to unsettle the car. So aim for at least the red and white striped curbing. And let's see where I got to on this. Yeah. So just brushing the green asphalt right there. If you go maybe another, I'd say probably a foot at the most beyond where I am right here, you'll feel the little rise in the curbing off to the right-hand side, and that is what you don't want to hit. So practice it, see how far you can get over, but understand, and then when you feel that bump, you'll know you've gone too far and you need to back it off just a little bit. But if you do that properly, then you should be able to get back on the gas pretty hard. What you don't want is, if you've allowed the car to unsettle too much, either by your braking or by hitting that curb poorly, you don't want to have to wait for the car to settle at this point in order to get back on the gas. You also don't want to run so far wide that you're going to wind up in the dirt, because that is going to force you to come off of the gas as well, and obviously it's just going to slow the car down as a result. When you go back on the gas at the apex on the right-hander, you don't want to lift the slightest bit all the way up this hill, right? Because this is a flat-out zone. And if you have to lift anywhere for any reason, you are losing time to the field. Okay? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about setup, because I do think that that it matters on this track. And I think turn one and this turn are good examples of why. So turn one, you have grip issues when you're coming out of on the exit of the corner, right? That you have to be concerned about. And there are a couple of other corners where that's going to be an issue as well. This corner is difficult on the entry because it is a balance issue, right? It's very easy under braking here to allow the back end to take over, start moving around, and you'll wind up sliding through the corner. That happens all the time. It's probably the single biggest mistake I make is where I just get a little bit off on the brakes on this corner, and I wind up sort of sliding the back end in through the apex, which is not what I want, because that's costing me time. I have to wait for the car to gather itself before I can get back on the gas. You don't want to drift through this corner, right? You want the car to be stable, but that's tough to do because you're going downhill. It's a fast corner with heavy braking leading up to it, so there's a lot that can go wrong. Getting the balance of the car correct in order to handle this is crucial, in my opinion, because you have to be able to control the car in the braking zone and through the apex here. If I were you, I'd say if you're fairly new to this track, I would start with a full wing to begin with, and only back off on that later as I start getting comfortable. The other thing I would recommend doing is looking at your ride heights, right? So how much rake are you running? If the back end is moving around on you a lot, look at decreasing the amount of rake that you're running so that the weight stays more planted on the rear end. The third thing that I would look at is your brake bias. Whatever it is you're usually comfortable running in whatever car it is that you drive, it may be too far rearward for this particular braking zone right here. Okay, so if you're struggling to control it, particularly under braking and towards the end of the braking zone, then try moving your brake bias forwards gradually until you find a place that can work. Any of those three things, a combination of wing, decrease rake, and moving the brake bias forward, should help you stabilize the car so that you can get through this corner a little bit more easily and more confidently. As you start getting more comfortable with the track and with this corner specifically, you can then start backing off on some of those settings, right? Particularly the rake, because the downside to having less rake with the back end being lower to the ground is that the car is not going to turn as well as you may want it to. So if you're learning the track, drop the rake down, but as you start getting comfortable, start experimenting with a little more rake and see if you can still get your way through these corners while adding a little bit of agility to the car at the same time. And let's take a look at just how much you're throwing the weight around here at high speed on this little exchange. I mean, that's a whole lot of weight that gets thrown over to the left side over there and has to stay there for a long time at a very high speed. If the back end starts going on you, it's going to be very hard to gather the car back in. So it takes a lot of practice right there to get that corner right. Okay, so we're flat out here, and let's see. Let's go up to the apex of this right-hander, and because as is often the case, it determines what we do. Okay, so we're going back uphill at this point. This is by far the worst corner on the track for the Lambo. It's the one that I struggle to get right, all of the time. It's not very comfortable through this corner at all. In large part because of the massive bump that is right here at the end of the red and white striped curbing. If I'm too far to the right at this point and I catch that bump, it throws the front end into the air, tosses the Lambo around, and I'm going to lose a ton of time, assuming I don't spin. Understand this though: you're going to hit it from time to time. So it's something to practice. If you're running laps and you hit this, do not attempt to save your lap at that point by getting back on the throttle. Okay? Don't save time, save your lap, because you are going to lose time. But if you push it, you are going to lose your lap as well, right? So try to practice getting it through your head that if you catch this this corner too heavy right here and hit that bump, off the gas until you're sure the car is stable enough that you can get back onto it comfortably, because this corner right here feels a little bit off camber to me as it comes up over this rise, and you're going to have significant rear grip issues, just like turn 1 on the exit here. Okay, if you combine that fact with a car that is unstable because you've caught the big bump on the exit here, you are absolutely going to wreck yourself, right? So program yourself that if you hit that bump on the right-hand side, instantly do away with every bit of aggression in your mind and go defensive. Go totally defensive and save your lap, because aggression will do nothing but get you killed right there. Okay? So understanding that, you got to understand that my priority then, as far as my exit, is I can't hit that bump because it's going to ruin my lap time at the very least. So okay, so that determines a lot of what I want to do. Now let's back up to okay. So first things first, I want my wheels out, the right wheels out on the red and white striped curbing. Right? I want them all the way out here. The other thing is I want to be all the way out here, almost right up until I get to that access road that's up here on the right hand side. I don't want to turn in here too early. Maximum track width with a late turn in. That is what I'm going for. Okay, so I'm going to get all the way out here, and I'm going to hold it right up until I get up to the access road, and then I'm going to start my turn in, because I want to come off of this red and white striped curbing on the left side of the track. If I'm in the center of the track at this point, as I go into my braking zone, that is going to force me to be extremely narrow on my corner entry into the right-hander. So track width becomes absolutely crucial at this point. Now, one thing I will say, though, is that you'll see that I brake much more towards the center of the track from the left-hand side. I have seen some drivers in some cars who are able to stay further to the left and take what I would call a later entry into this corner than I do. I suspect that's largely because there are some cars that can handle that more. What I can tell you is that in the Lambo, if I stay out here to the left too far and too long, then it feels like the negative camber up here at the top of the corner starts taking over, and I lose my ability to turn in entirely, right? So because of the way the corner is shaped, at least in the Lamborghini, I feel like I have no choice but to start turning in a little earlier than I would want to, because it gives me a very narrow window to hit the apex that I want to hit, right? But if you can hold it out here further to the left, turn in a little bit later and open this corner up more than I can, if your car allows you to do that, knock yourself out. I wish I could. But I can't. I have to come more towards the center of the track here under braking. And the kicker is I have to convince myself not to turn in too early, because I've got to stay off of that bump at the end of the red and white striped curbing. So a lot of times I'll be doing a little micro adjustments here to try not to let myself get too far in. Let's see whether I catch it. No, not too bad there. Yeah, I didn't catch it too bad. So that allows me to go back full throttle relatively early. But so those are my main concerns on this corner. I want to be as left as I can right here. For me, I brake towards the center of the track, and then I try to be very patient about when I start turning in, so that I don't start turning in too early. Otherwise, if I do, I'm going to wind up in the grass and or catching the bump at the end of the curbing. So lots of little micro adjustments right here to try to put the car where I want to. And then as soon as I feel like the car is exited enough and settled enough, then I can go back on to full power. The The power oversteer is another big concern here, just like it was at turn 1, and the same way it will be in a couple of other areas. For that, I tend to like, from a setup standpoint, I like to go with softer rear suspension, both wheel rate and ARB, and a lower preload differential to try to accommodate that slippage, that I will tend to get at this corner and some of those other ones on exit. The lowering the rake can also help, but again, that's a bit of a dicey subject because you don't want to give up too much of the nimbleness of your car at the same time. So if you're just talking about these, sort of second and first gear corners, so turn 1, this corner, and then the last 2 hairpins, those can all be very tricky as far as being traction zones. Those are where I look to solve those with mechanical adjustments in the mechanical grip. That's where I lower the ARB, the wheel rate, and the differential to try to give myself a little bit better grip when I'm getting back on power in these high torque zones. Okay, so assuming you've negotiated that corner fair enough, you can run quite a ways out onto this curb. Though you can get a track limits violation here. It's obviously not the biggest issue or the biggest problem area for track limits, but you absolutely can pick up track limits warning there if you're not careful. Okay, let's you absolutely want to cut this corner, all right? And that will determine how you go about this corner. You don't have to, and I think the angle at which you cut it can be extremely important. Okay, because what I would say is that you can come through this apex anywhere from a relatively shallow angle to a much tighter angle, and your car will react differently as a result. Okay, so let's go to let's see. Okay, so I cut this corner heavily. Let's go to the overhead helo cam. And I want you to see the angle my car is at when I cut it, right? Because I would call this probably about the most severe approach that you will probably see anyone take this corner, okay? Because you can absolutely take this corner less aggressively than I do and still turn extremely good laps. It's just you're going to have to give something up in a little bit different area, okay? So what you choose to do right here will determine where you brake, where you turn in, and how you exit as far as this corner goes. So let's talk about the angle of the car because that's really the critical thing in my mind. Okay. Now from the overhead, you can see how far to the right I was pointed. You can take this where your steering input is not as severe as what I use here, and make it more of a gradual turn, round it off a little bit more. Okay, I tend to square this corner off more than some people do. Either approach is perfectly fine. I've seen extremely fast drivers use both of them. The difference is what it means as far as your exit goes. To me, this feels like a very natural approach on it. Okay, let's talk about the pros and cons. First of all, the con. It's going to put you over here to the right even further, and this is where you're starting where the car is going to bounce around more. Is as you're coming over from that transition between, the green asphalt to the grass to the red and white striped curbing and back onto the pavement. The car is going to have a tendency to move around on you a lot more. Okay. And when it does, you simply have to wait on it before you can get back onto the throttle. But when you get it right, the car is already pointing in a very, very good direction, which allows you to get back on the throttle early and fully, and not have to lift it. Okay, you can see that I will run right up here to the right side of the track on my exit as I'm going back to full throttle. The the con of it is that it's easier to destabilize the car on the right hand side. The pro is that when the car does stay stable through the turn, then it's going to allow you to get back on the throttle very early and very smoothly. You do not have to take as severe of an angle here, though. You can come through here in essentially the same position that I am in, however, with the nose of your car pointed a little bit more to the left. Okay? The advantage there is that it will keep you further to the left on the red and white striped curbing and the green asphalt, and that will remove the destabilizing effect that I will have a tendency to get, or at least that I will get more often than someone who comes at this with a more shallow angle to their car. Okay, so you're going to have a more stable car, right? What it's going to do, however, is it's going to put you on your exit much further to the left. You'll wind up being more towards the center left part of the track, with a lot more turning left to do from this point on. So we might be able to get back on the throttle, or start getting back on the throttle at the same time, but when I do it right, the way I'm trying to do it, I will be able to get back on full throttle probably earlier than you will be able to if you take that sort of shallower entry, wider exit type approach. I don't know that there's any time difference whatsoever between those two approaches. So if one of them works for you, stick with it, because I don't think there's anything wrong with either of them. But it's important to understand that there are absolutely two different approaches that you can take. Now, so that you understand how it is we're coming out of the corner, let's talk about what I do in order to get into the corner, because obviously that apex is totally blind. So, how the hell do you know where to start your braking at? Okay, I'm using this cockpit view because that's the one that I drive in, so that you can see exactly what I use. If you look off to the right side on the barrier, you see the orange barrier marker. That is my braking reference. I'm braking after that passes out of my peripheral vision. I like it because my eyes are naturally wanting to be focused over to the right side of the track, where I'm going to be picking up the apex. The orange stands out very easily, and it's very easy to pick up even at full speed, right? So I can just position the car on the left side of the track, put my eyes up there towards the apex, and then look for the orange marker in my peripheral vision. And then once it passes out of my peripheral vision, then that's how I know that I can go on to the brakes. Obviously, you pick the apex up late, but if you can if you if you can find yourself a consistent brake marker that you're able to use, then with enough practice, you'll be able to repeat it enough that you know exactly where you're going to pick up the apex and where you can start turning into it, and minor adjustments that you'll have to make around it. So the orange barrier marker is the one that I use. Now, whichever approach you use, obviously this is another corner where you have to wait for the grip to come to you. Throttle discipline is everything. So you've got at least what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 corners, probably 6 at least, where throttle discipline on your exits matters, or you're going to be struggling with power oversteer and the back end sliding out from under you. And there's no question that that exit is one of those areas. Okay, the chicane. Otherwise known as drive-through central. Okay, now this is pretty straightforward, really. You all know the corner. I'll make a couple of recommendations to you on things that I think you can try to get a little bit better, a little bit more consistent at it. But there's not much to this corner. It's easy to screw it up and get track limit warnings. My braking marker is I use the number 1 board. And once again, depends on how much fuel that I have, because as you can see, you start going downhill just a little bit, which means your fuel load is going to affect you more than it might in other areas. With a full fuel load, I'll start getting on the brakes as soon as I'm getting past the number 1 board, and on a hot lap, quali lap situation, I can push it quite a bit further. Not quite to the halfway point, but relatively close to it. In a qualifying lap, I will carry this corner in 3rd gear. On a full fuel load, I will generally take 2nd gear, because the car is just heavier. It just moves around a lot more sluggishly, with very little fuel in here. It's more nimble, and I can maintain speed in 3rd gear without suffering so much understeer that I can't get the car turned. That's much more difficult with a full fuel load, especially in the Lamborghini. It's a car that sucks with full fuel. So in full fuel mode, you'll see me do this in 2nd gear to bleed off just a little bit more speed. But what I'm looking to do is to get the left wheel onto the green asphalt here on the left side, and then get the right wheel onto the green asphalt on the right side. This is another traction zone where traction is absolutely an issue on the exit. One thing I will recommend that you try if you do take this in 2nd gear, depending on the car you drive or how much fuel you're running. So in a race, when I'm taking this in 2nd gear, you will usually see me short shifting up to 3rd gear by this point, because I want to get back on the gas, but there's a whole lot of stuff. There's a whole lot of stuff going on the right-hand curb that is going to cost you traction. The reality is you're going to have very little rubber on the road itself. for 10 or 15 meters here. So your grip is going to suffer no matter what you do. So look at this, because you're going to park your car right here with going over the the little bit of a sausage curb, the black and yellow striped sausage curb, and then it's going to go on to the green asphalt, which is going to be a little bit more slick, and then you've got a sawtooth curb that your left tires are going to be dealing with here on the left-hand side, and all of that while you're turning at the same time. So you also have a couple of steel grates there that you're going to run over. So you have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, roughly 4 different grip surfaces that your tires can be transitioning between at any given time while you are getting fully back on the gas and still making a pretty severe turn. Grip sucks, right? So you're going to have to be a little bit cautious on your exit for this. I like to be in third gear by this point to remove some of the torque from the Lambo's engines, and that helps that significantly. The other thing that you want to do is to make sure that you get the angle of your car right. How do I want to look at that? Let's try it this way first. You want to get the angle of your car right so that you can minimize the steering angle you have to use, and therefore maximize both the grip level and okay. So you can see right here in between the two corners, I am already back full on the gas before I get into this little low grip area. If you position your car through those two corners where you're using too much steering angle into the left-hander and then forcing yourself to use too much steering angle into the right-hander, that's where those grip issues are going to become most apparent, because you're just going to have too much steering angle to deal with the loss of grip that you're going to experience. So you are going to have to straighten the corners as much as you can, but if you can get to the point where you can confidently go back on the throttle, full throttle, as soon as you get past the left-hand apex, then you will be in pretty damn good shape. So think about it for a second, right? You can delay your turn into the left-hander, and you'll be pointed further to the left as you come through this apex. But that means you will have to turn further to the right when you negotiate the right-hander. That's what I'm talking about practicing the different angles of the car so that you can minimize your steering input. Straighten the corner as much as possible. Back on the throttle, full throttle, and I won't have to let up off it again. So when you watch your replays there, spend some time looking at and thinking about the angle of your car through the left-hander and the right-hander, and how much steering that is requiring you to use. Okay? Because there's a good chance that's going to have a significant effect on how much grip you have when you go to the exit, right? For instance, if you try to push your braking zone too late here, right? Say, I'm going to make up time on the brakes. What's that going to do? It's going to force you to turn into the corner, into the left-hander later. That's going to force you to use more steering angle into the left-hander, which is going to force you to use more steering angle into the right-hander. Okay. You may find that you're better off backing up your braking a little bit so that you can begin turning into the left-hander sooner, but at a more shallow angle, which then opens up the right-hander. In other words, don't get caught up in the braking phase of your corner entry here, because I don't think it's as important as what you do at this moment of the entry, how or when you turn in and how much you turn in. Okay? So think about all of that and how you're approaching it, what that does to the angle of the car and the angle of the steering input you're using when you go through these two apexes. Because there's time to be had here if you really can get it right. Oh, you know what I want to do as we get to the hairpins? I want you to look at the shape of these two corners. Because I don't know if you ever really have. But they're actually both kind of interesting for different reasons. Okay, so the first one, as you can see, is almost a perfect square, right? I mean, obviously this is an old airport, so we're looking at runways, and they really just squared this one off almost entirely. The inside curb on the inside of the corner is obviously not a perfect square, but it's actually pretty square. You know, it's not your typical hairpin that has a consistent oval. It's much more square than most hairpins are. Now look at the second one. The first thing I want you to notice is how narrow the track is on your approach, then how much it widens right at corner entry, and then narrows severely right up at the apex again before it widens out again on entry, on exit. And compared to the last one, look at how much rounder it is and how much more oblong, I would say, it is. It's one that gets where the previous hairpin is what's the word that I'm looking for? Not consistent, but it's equal on both sides. I'm forgetting the term that I'm struggling for right now, but both the entry and the exit essentially look identical, right? That's not the case on this corner. You have a much sort of flatter kind of entry onto the corner, and then a much tighter exit of the curb when you're coming out of it, right? So for the moment, I just want you to notice how different the shapes of those two corners are, and then let's talk about how we get through them. You can both corners, you can do either a single or double apex. As most of you know who have watched me for a while, you know that I have a tendency to prefer a single apex with a late entry and late apex. And generally speaking, that is true for this one, although because this one is downhill, right? It's very easy to blow your brake marker by just a little bit and blow the corner as a result. So first thing to understand is downhill braking zone, right? Which means if you try to push your braking zone too hard, you're absolutely going to blow this corner every single time. My brake marker is the number 1 board, and I'm braking just as I pass it on the left-hand side. This is one that I will be looking to make a mid to late apex, so late corner entry with a mid to late corner apex. So I will hold it out to the right side for quite a while before I start turning into it. Now, because this corner is so long, I mean, honestly, it feels like you're in this corner just forever. Um, because it's so long and because it's downhill, when what I will do is my goal is to do a late apex, but if I miss my braking zone by a little bit and overshoot it, then I will adjust and turn it into a double apex. Okay, if that makes any sense. So let's watch overhead because this one I did actually miss it by just a little bit, I think. And you'll see me come off of the apex. See how the shape of that is a little bit wide right there? I'll show you. Let's see if I think on my previous lap I got it much more correct. Yeah. This is much more what I'm looking to achieve. Where I really catch it mid and then come up on the curb towards the end of it. That's much more what I'm trying to do. But you can absolutely double apex it if you prefer, and from there it's just once again throttle management because you're almost certainly going to be struggling for traction as you come out at this point. I do not think it's necessary to have your exit so wide that you're running out. I say that because at the beginning of the video, one of the things I talked about was track width using all of the track, and generally you would want to on your exits. I don't think it's critical on the exit for that corner. The critical part for that is getting the car turned, straightened back up so that you can get back onto full throttle. If that takes you out wide, that's fine. But if you come up a little bit shallow off of it, but you're still back on the throttle as quickly as possible, that is more important to me on that corner. Okay. Now, this corner is a little bit tricky in that once again it's one that you can either single apex or double apex. But if you are going to do it as a single apex with a late entry and a late apex, you have to understand that because the shape of this corner is a little bit strange. Even if you're going for a late entry, you are going to be further into the left of the track than you typically would. Okay, so by way of example, let's go back to okay, so this one I know I definitely want to try to do a late apex, and you can see how long I keep the car over to the left side before I do the turn in for my entry, right? That is not the case for this corner. Even if I'm going for a late entry, I'm not going to keep the car out there. I'm going to start turning it in towards the middle of the track pretty much immediately. Okay. I believe, yeah. If let's go, I think I remember seeing this this earlier. Okay, so we're coming back uphill at this point, right? The thing that I want you to understand is that as you come up to your braking point, which is right here at the for me, it's just as I'm approaching the end of the red and white striping. So as it turns to solid white, that's what I'm looking for, and I am braking just before I get to it, right? So, so just as I'm going onto the brakes right here, you'll notice that that right up there around where you're starting to turn into the corner, there's a bit of a crest in the road. And what I think is happening is that crest is creating a bit of a fall off on the opposite side of it that affects the steering of the car depending on where you are on the track. Okay, so I think what happens is that if you get yourself too far out to the right-hand side, as you come over this little crest right around here, then I think that the road has a tendency to fall away from you a little bit on the outside of the track. Okay, and you might try it just to see you can see what I'm saying. So but you'll feel it when either you hold the car out there too far to the right hand side, and you'll also feel it if you miss your braking zone by a little bit and just let it drift too far. It gets much harder to get the car turned, right? Especially because you run out of room up near the apex because the track narrows so much. You have almost twice as much room here at the entry as you do at the apex. So if you miss your braking point and go past the apex too far, you'll literally run out of track very quickly. So I don't think you want to treat this like a normal hairpin in that sense. Even if you're going to go for a late entry, your approach to it needs to be more towards the center of the track as opposed to holding it out there to the right-hand side and coming in late. I don't think you want to do that on this one. Okay, so just as I get up to where it's solid white, that's where I go hard on the brakes. This one, my personal preference is to double apex this one. I don't usually double apex most corners, but this one I prefer to. But I actually got this one a little bit wrong too, and just missed the braking point by a little bit and blew it and blew the apex a little bit. Not horribly, but as you can see, I'm certainly not sitting on the red and white stripe curbing on the left hand side. But you get it turned as quickly as you can, and once again wait for the rear grip to hook up. The one thing to keep in mind about this corner is that understand that the shape of it can be deceiving as far as your exit goes, okay? Because at the apex where it narrows considerably, right, Your brain will feel how narrow the track is there, and you have to remind yourself as you come to the exit here that it widens out significantly on the exit, which means you can open up the steering wheel sooner in order to take advantage of that extra room. So if you find yourself exiting this corner and your car is much closer to the middle of the track and you're not using all of the exit, then go back and reinforce to yourself, no, this opens up, so my steering can open up. That will allow me to get back on the throttle sooner. That can help you as far as the exit goes. But otherwise, it's a question of waiting for the grip to hook up and managing your throttle input so that you don't spin this thing into the wall. Okay, that is the track. Let's go back and do the full lap. Do overhead first since we're here already. This was my best lap so far, by the way. It's a 27.3. I've gotten to the point where I can do a mid 27 pretty easily now. I think I've got a shot at getting it into a high 26, but I don't know for sure yet. Yeah, a little wide on both of those hairpins. Otherwise, that was a pretty good lap. Pretty much did everything I wanted to do there. And double check the time. 27.357. So that is definitely a good lap for me. And that's it. Okay, guys, that's Donnington Park. Hope you find that helpful. I'll be working on Nürburgring next to get us ready. Otherwise, I'll see you back on the track later this week, and Yeah. So back to it. Have a good night. Take care. We'll see everybody.